Hi, sweetheart.
Hey, Daddy.
Caitlin, you're going to be staying home tonight, right?
Listen, we're just gonna hang out here, watch TV or something, but that is it.
Caitlin tried to get away. You said that she put up a hell of a fight. Think about your past. Who would have the inclination to do this?
I did you a big favor when I let you walk out. And now I want you to repay me by doing nothing. Bury the hurt.
Do what you have to do. Whatever it takes.
I just don't want you falling back on any of your old habits.
I'm out of the game. You know that.
Yeah, I know you. Why are they after you? What did you do?
No child should have to pay for their father's sins.
I do need some help.
Just how deep do you want this to go?
How deep is hell?
Hello and welcome to The Complete Works, an in-depth look into the career and filmography of Nicolas Cage. My name is Mike Smith. Joining me on this journey into the depths of true Cagedom is my friend, co-host, and fellow Cageaholic,
Mike DeCriscio.
How you doing today, Mike?
I am doing swell. It's a grand old time.
That's great.
We're here. It's a Complete Works day. Like, what more do I need?
That's great. I'm glad that you're not filled with the feeling that the title of this movie would imply.
No. It would have had... Never mind. It's fine.
So, Mike, remember a couple of weeks ago when we talked about the movie Stolen?
Yes.
And how it's part of the grand history of Taken ripoffs that were being made for a few years?
Right. The tradition in film.
Yes. Yeah, you can pretty much just take everything we said then and apply it to the movie we're talking about today. Because in 2014, Nicolas Cage starred in a movie as a guy who has to find the guys who kidnapped his teenage daughter once again. And this time it was called Rage. And you know, Mike, despite starring in Rage, he is still just Nicolas Cage.
Heard that.
Now, what you guys just heard was a theme song that Kyle Cullen put together for us really quick. Like I asked him to do this, and within like 10 seconds, I was like, "Can you please?" Not 10 seconds, 10 minutes. He responded back to me. He's like, "Done," and I was like, "Perfect, you're the man." So, thank you, Kyle, once again for that Smashing Pumpkins-esque Nicolas Cage theme song that I will be playing nonstop this entire episode.
The whole time?
The entire time. Every time I make that joke, and I'm going to make that joke a lot. Because, you know, Mike, despite starring in Rage, he is still just Nicolas Cage. Now, Nicolas Cage followed up his critically acclaimed dramatic turn in David Gordon Green's Joe with yet another direct-to-video action thriller, which I think at this point is pretty much par for the course with this podcast.
Yeah.
That's what we're getting kind of used to here. The reason this one comes around is because Cage was actually a big fan of director Paco Cabezas, and in particular a movie he made called Neon Flesh, which was a Spanish movie which garnered him some attention in Hollywood. So the opportunity came for the two of them to work together as Cabezas made his English-language debut, which was, of course, Rage. So, despite starring in Rage, he is still just Nicolas Cage. God damn it. And And the character Cage plays in Rage is named Paul McGuire, a former criminal who got out of the business and went straight. He's got a wife in this movie named Vanessa, and she's played by Rachel Nichols, best known for her roles in Alias and Criminal Minds, who fits pretty squarely into the character type of the Nicolas Cage young, hot, blonde wife that we also got in Trespass and Seeking Justice. And he spends the movie investigating the kidnapping of his daughter, Caitlin McGuire, played by Audrey Peoples, known for her roles on the TV show Nashville, and such classic films as Sharknado and Gem and the Holograms.
Wow.
Yeah, so there is that. As Cage looks into it, he's being followed by a cop named Peter St. John, a guy who's had his back over the years, but doesn't fully trust him. He's played by Danny Glover, of course best known for Lethal Weapon. And I think in this movie he is officially too old for this shit.
Yeah, he doesn't give a fuck anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of painful to watch a little bit. In the meantime, Cage sort of sets off a mob war against the Russian mafia. And Cage's former boss, Frank O'Donnell, is played by Peter Stormare, which makes this his third movie with Cage after 8mm and Wind Talkers. So the triple Cage reunion going on there.
Wow, that's pretty rare at this point.
Definitely. Now, the Russian guy facing off against him, Chernov, is played by Pasha D. Lichnikov, who has basically spent his entire career playing intimidating Russian dudes in just about every movie that calls for a Russian dude. Like, if you look at his IMDb and his Wikipedia, it's just like every Hollywood movie you can think of that has Russians in it, this guy was in it. Cage is backed up by his two old criminal buddies, Kane and Danny. Now, Kane is played by Max Ryan, known for his roles in The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and as a villain in Death Race with Jason Statham. While the cocaine-addicted Danny is played by Michael McGrady, who was also one of the detectives in The Frozen Ground. So there's another Cage reunion there.
That's right.
Yeah, you recognize that guy now?
Yeah.
Now, Caitlin's two friends in the movie are Mike and Evan. They're played by Max Fowler, known for his role on The Killing, and Jack Falahy, known for his role on How to Get Away with Murder. Also, Michael Papajohn appears in this movie as a guy named Vori. He also appeared in Drive Angry, and he will always be known as the guy who killed Uncle Ben in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movie.
Holy shit.
And also for his chain of pizza restaurants. Because his name is Papa John. I made that exact same joke in the Drive Angry review, and if he shows up again, I will make that same joke again. Because if we know anything about me, it's that I like to repeat jokes. By the way, Mike, did you know that despite starring his Rage, or despite starring in Rage, he is still just Nicolas Cage?
It's going to be a long episode. Everyone, buckle up.
Finally, at one point, you see a flashback to Cage's character's younger years, and the young Paul McGuire is played by Cage's own son, Weston Coppola Cage, who also appeared in Lord of War and had songs on the soundtrack for Drive Angry and Joe. So, there's I guess you could call that a Cage reunion, but really it's more just like, hey, it's. They spend a lot of time together. I assume he's his son.
I would hope, at least.
You would think. We don't go into that part of Cage's life on this podcast. We're strictly the movies here.
Yeah.
So Rage was written by Jim Agnew and Sean Keller, who would go on to co-write a movie together called The Capture in 2017. And it's directed by Paco Cabezas 4 years after his previous film Neon Flesh, and just 1 year before his next film, Mr. Right, which stars Sam Rockwell and Anna Kendrick. I believe it went direct to DVD, and from what I understand, it is supposed to be terrible. I have not seen it. I can't judge that, but I've heard it's really bad. Most recently, he's been working on TV on shows like Penny Dreadful, Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, and The Alienist.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, Rage had a budget of roughly $25 million, and I think it's safe to say that it bombed. I can't give you an actual number of how much money it made because I genuinely cannot find that number online.
Wow. Box Office Mojo let you down?
There's no entry for Rage on Box Office Mojo.
That's how you know.
Yeah, which makes me believe it probably didn't get a theatrical release, but if it did, it was a really, really small one. In any case, Rage was released on May 9th, 2014, and if, like most people, you were seeing something else, then it's likely you were going to see Seth Rogen, Zac Efron, and Rose Byrne in a movie that I consider one of the funniest of the decade, Neighbors. You could have also seen Mom's Night Out, which was a faith-based comedy starring Sean Astin and Patricia Heaton, or a really crappy animated movie based on The Wizard of Oz called Legends of Oz, Dorothy's Return, which somehow got a wide release. This was also the first weekend that Jon Favreau's Chef hit theaters, which was a nice little indie break for him before jumping right back into the Disney machine. And the IMDb plot synopsis for Rage reads, When the daughter of a reformed criminal is kidnapped, he rounds up his old crew and seeks his own brand of justice. And I wanted to bring up that... I wanted to make a point there to note that these movies have gotten so similar that the title of a different Cage movie can be in the plot synopsis for this movie, and it can mean exactly the same thing.
Holy shit.
He seeks his own brand of justice. That is word for word what is in the IMDb plot synopsis there. So, Mike, what are your overall thoughts on the movie Rage? Does it fill you with rage, or do you have a more mellow reaction?
What I was going to say that earlier, or I was going to lead this when you asked me, am I filled with the emotion? That's the title of this movie. And in order for that to happen, this movie would have to elicit some sort of response, and it just doesn't. This movie is so bad. So you can forgive some of these like direct-to-DVD movies. Like at least some of the action is fun in the other ones.
Yeah.
Or like the plot is kind of interesting sometimes. With Rage, it's just like bad all the way down. Like I just was not invested. I didn't care. These characters are awful people doing very awful things, and like, okay. I just don't like. You're an evil person, Cage. I don't really care if you find your daughter or not anymore. I'm over it.
Yeah.
It starts with like when his daughter gets taken. Oh, excuse me. He's filled with his daughter gets taken, and like he goes to the boyfriend's house or like the friend's house, and he's like tells him this story or like. Just like blatantly racist overtones. He's like, "Yeah, I beat up this Puerto Rican looking guy for calling my wife a slut or whatever." And I was like, "I don't need this in my life. Like, you're a bad person. I'm not interested anymore."
Yeah.
And then it continues on for another hour and a half.
Yep. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, this is another very lame, gritty, direct-to-video action movie with a couple of choice Cage moments. I'll give it that.
Yeah, that's true.
But otherwise, not much to offer. Even with, like, you mentioned that some of the other ones are... Some of them are kind of fun. Like, I think Trespass is a kind of fun movie. I think Stolen is probably the best of the direct-to-video movies that we've watched so far. And I think Stolen is, like, on its own merits, kind of entertaining. I think it's it is what it is, but it's a relatively fun time. And then you have movies like this and Seeking Justice, which are like they're just bland. There's not much going on. The action in this movie is incoherent. Like there's as far as action filmmaking goes, there's ways to shoot action that are clear and concise, and then there is this movie, which to be fair is it's ripping off Taken, and it kind of rips off Taken. Or at least the Taken sequels, in terms of how it's filming its action, where it's just cutting nonstop to the point where it's like with a second can pass and like 15 cuts will happen in that in that span.
Yes.
And so the action incoherent, the writing pretty bad, and in the end, nothing that happens in the movie actually matters. And I think that's what really annoys me the most about it, because I like the idea of what this movie goes for at the end. But I don't think this movie has the skill to pull that off, and we'll talk about what that is in a few minutes, I think. I do appreciate that this movie goes further than movies like Taken, and actually has the daughter die about halfway through, or a little before halfway, maybe 30, 40 minutes in. And that's where the rage really kicks in.
Oh, yeah. That's when they realized what the title of the movie was going to be.
Exactly, yeah. So, it starts off as a Taken ripoff, and, it starts like as a rescue mission to find his daughter, and then it becomes a revenge story, which, I think is, if you're going to rip off Taken, that's an interesting way to do it. It kind of differentiates you from those movies, but it just completely whiffs the idea in the end. Like, it does nothing with that concept. Now, what did you think of Nicolas Cage in Rage, Mike?
That's fun to say.
It is.
Because I've heard that despite starring in Rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage.
Now you're getting into it.
I'm doing it. But anyway, I think he's just like off the walls in this, and and mostly it's not even like there. Like you said, there are a few choice Cage moments, but like for the most part, it's just like I'm an angry, dark past man, and that's it for an hour and a half. Like sometimes he yells, and sometimes he doesn't, and sometimes he's trying to be a good guy, and like there's no selling meth at my daughter's sweet 16 party. You hear me, fellas? And then we're murdering dudes, and like I don't understand what his character is or really what's going on for most of this movie.
Yeah, I want to talk about the Sweet 16 party just as a quick aside, because the implication of that conversation was that they were going to be having the Sweet 16 party there, right? Yeah. At the dive bar that Cage's ex-criminal friend owns. And I'm like, what teenage girl wants to have her Sweet 16 at the dive bar that, the sleazy coke dealer works at? Like, it just doesn't...
Not even coke, meth.
The meth dealer, yeah.
Yeah. The guys at the door sell meth to this bar. Yeah, that's a good spot.
Yeah, it's just it was just surreal. And honestly, I mean, his daughter, it's weird. The daughter looks a little bit older than teenage. Like, she looks like she's in her 20s. And when she first showed up on screen, like, Cage was picking her up from school. But like the way they're looking at each other, and like the way she like kisses him on the cheek, it looked like it was like a romantic relationship for a second.
Yeah.
Was that wasn't just me? Okay.
No, it definitely comes off very sleazy, and it's gross.
Yeah, and then it kind of backpedals from that, and it kind of becomes like, oh, you need to do your homework. Yeah. That kind of thing.
He's like leaning on the hood of his car, waiting, like with the sunglasses on, looking all cool.
Right, he's like Ferris Bueller picking up his girlfriend at the school, right?
Yeah, but like direct-to-DVD version.
Right. With middle-aged Cage.
Oh, God.
But yeah, this is, I think, pretty much the same level of performance he's giving in movies like Seeking Justice or Stolen. Maybe with like a little more intensity this time around, because Rage, I think, is a movie, I'm pretty sure it's rated R, it has to be.
It must be. Yeah.
And, it's definitely going for a grittier version of the story than some of those other movies are. And so I think Cage is giving a little more, in terms of grit, to his performance. He's got true grit, Mike.
Whoa. Well, Kyle, make a song. Oh, wait. No, this isn't live. Never mind.
But anyway, yeah. So how do you think this role fits into the roles that we've seen Nicolas Cage play in other movies, Mike? I mean, we've mentioned the fact that this kind of is in the same mold as movies like Stolen or Seeking Justice.
Yeah. It sort of evokes like a little bit of 8mm to me in some way, like just that like seedy underworlds that like he knows how to navigate kind of thing. Deadfall, same, like just being crazy and also part of like that criminal underworld stuff.
I can totally see that, and I mean, going back to the 8mm thing, Peter Stormare is also here, so there's that too.
Oh yeah, there you go. Look at that. Another guy who spent his whole career being that like weird Russian guy,
right? Pretty much.
Movies.
Most memorably recently in John Wick Chapter 2, in the beginning of that movie.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think this movie does have something that we've been talking about a lot in the most recent episodes of the show, which is that Cage is the father once again, the kind of authority figure, mentor, father figure to a younger kid. This time around, things don't work out so well.
Right.
But that has been like a recurring theme that we've noticed over like the 2010s Cage movies. Maybe it's just because he's at that age where he's playing fatherly roles. But movies like Stolen, for example, or Joe, he's like a father figure in that movie, or The Croods. I think The Croods is where we first picked up on the pattern.
Right. Well, I feel like there's a difference, right? We've talked about it a bunch. I feel like The Croods and Joe. It's much more, while not like a positive relationship necessarily, it is much more paternal.
Yes.
And that is a factor in Rage and all these other movies, but in Rage and Stolen and these movies, it feels more like a plot device to action, rather than about that being a relationship.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you there. So, yeah, I guess we should talk about the scenes that stood out to us in the movie. Right? I feel like we're rushing through the podcast, but also, I don't think we have that much to say about Rage.
There's not really a lot happening in this movie.
There's not much going on here. But we should talk about the ending of this movie, the big twist. Right?
Yeah.
So, I texted you after I watched him and was like, man, that was pretty fucking dumb. And I'm curious what you thought about it, but I'll spell out what it is. So the movie's twist ending, obviously, Cage's daughter is killed off at like a 35-minute mark. They discover her body, and Cage goes on this rampage throughout the movie because he's filled with rage, right? And he basically starts this like big Russian mob war, which, by the way, this movie takes place in Mobile, Alabama, where the Russian mafia hangs out.
I kind of assumed it was New Orleans. I didn't even... Was there a title card I missed or something?
I don't think so. I've just read that it takes place in Mobile. In the plot synopsis, it even says Mobile, Alabama. But yeah, this movie takes place in Alabama, where the Russian mafia is well known to be established, I assume. And basically, as he's doing this, Cage kind of goes through his past, his criminal past, and is like, okay, who would have it out for me and stuff? And so he enlists his two friends, and they basically just spend the entire last hour of the movie beating the shit out of different Russian mobsters. And they're not getting anywhere. They don't understand like why they don't have any idea of who kidnapped the daughter or anything like that, or who killed her. And then at the end, it turns out that it wasn't the Russian mafia after all. They were completely unrelated to the whole daughter thing, but it was just her dumb friend Michael, who was drunk and playing with guns. Cage's guns, by the way. So he was like playing with guns outside, and like he was like, "Oh, whoops!" and he accidentally shoots her. And that's like the big reveal at the end. And it feels like, the movie is trying to make a statement about the futility of revenge in some way, right?
Right.
That's the idea, I think. Cage spends the entire movie going after the completely wrong people. He starts this huge mob war. Dozens of people are dying needlessly. And in actuality, it was just this random happenstance of this stupid teenage kid. But the movie isn't skilled enough to pull that off,
Yeah.
it's. I think it's an okay idea. I kind of like the idea of it, but it does not work in this movie. It just makes the whole movie feel retroactively pointless. Because you spend so much time going further and further into the mob war, and it's like this has to pay off in some way. Especially because we pretty much abandon Michael and Evan from most of the movie's running time too, so you basically just forget those characters exist. They don't if they didn't come back at the end of the movie, no one would have cared. It's one of those twists that kind of just comes out of nowhere. Yeah,
it makes it feel like an important twist because I forgot about these guys, so it's whoa, I never saw this coming.
Right?
Because I literally forgot. Of course you didn't. Because
the movie does nothing to set that up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
The only hint that I got towards it, and I was so thrown off by this when the movie was beginning, is when the actual kidnapping happens, because you don't see it right when it first happens. So it's such a weird thing. You're watching the movie. Cage and his wife leave the house and leave the daughter with her two friends alone. They're watching Night of the Living Dead on TV because it's public domain, so the filmmakers don't have to pay for it. Which, by the way, if you ever see Night of the Living Dead in a movie, it's because it's public domain and the filmmakers don't want to spend any money on it. That's the entire
they're
reason.
Coming to get you, Barbara.
Exactly. So they leave the daughter and the two friends alone in the house. And then, Cage is and his wife are off to this dinner. And then it cuts back to the house, and it's just the kids hanging out. They're talking. And then it cuts very abruptly to the city landscape, and then it cuts to police sirens going down the street, and then it cuts to Cage at the restaurant, and Danny Glover's there. But it's such an abrupt transition from it's almost mid sentence the way it cuts from the one scene to the next.
I don't remember exactly. So I believe you that this movie would be so ham-fisted that that's how it would work.
But it shows up and it's Danny Glover's at the restaurant, and he says to Cage there's a problem with your daughter. But the previous scene that we were in had no indication that anything bad was happening. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And the reason for that is because that would give away the movie's twist. There was
no robbery.
There was no robbery. It was just the kids being drunk assholes. And then so when the Cage shows back up at the house and the daughter's missing and the kids in the ambulance or whatever, they kind of flash back to the kid's story about what happened. Where kidnappers come to the house and stuff. And I love that flashback because it's such a I felt this way about Trespass too. If you remember when they had the teenage girl go into the party, where it's youths, they're always drinking and playing video games, and
oh my god,
they're portrayed like these hedonistic monsters because they're playing Guitar Hero and drinking some gin. That's it.
Yeah. I forgot about that,
and I thought that was pretty great. But so anyway, the Cage kind of shows up at Michael's house, interrogates him a little bit about it, and he has this really funny line. He's trying to get the story out of Michael, and Michael's there's kidnappers, they had guns and stuff, and Cage says to him, "I would expect you to get shot trying to protect her."
Person I just met.
Yeah. Exactly. So that was a very intense line from Cage. But he interrogates the kid, gets nothing out of him. So then he goes on his little mob war chase hunt or whatever. And then the movie ends with Cage finding out somehow. How did Cage find out?
So the whole thing is the ballistics report is that it was this Russian pistol that's a favorite of the Russian mob, right? So that's how he like targets them, kind of thing. Which seems like a lot to go on, or not a lot to go on to start a mob war.
Yeah.
And then we have this. We keep flashing back to this moment when they rob the car, the money from the guy when they're teenagers or whatever, or they're young men. And one of the guns they keep is that Russian pistol.
Right.
It seems like he has a memory of throwing it in the lockbox with the money, and then he goes home and finds it in the lockbox with the money where he kept it. And then he just like scream cries, and then we get the reveal that Michael shot him,
right,
or shot her,
right. So the story went that Mike, they were playing around, they got into Cage's lockbox, started playing with guns, and then he shot the daughter, and so Cage does not end up killing Michael.
No,
that's the one. The big trope of revenge movies is that you make it all the way to the final person, then you can't do the last one because they just made a mistake, or they see the humanity in them, or whatever.
Right.
And this movie is bad at that, so it's.
Yeah, I feel like trying to have a commentary on the uselessness of revenge in your revenge movie, like not great, not a great.
I mean, it can be good, like it can work. I think
that's true.
There's a little bit of. I think there's a little bit of that in Kill Bill, for example. But
right.
there's I think there's plenty of revenge movies that are like that. This movie just doesn't do it well. Because it makes the whole everything that preceded it pointless, because everything's entirely unrelated to the actual guy who killed her,
right? It makes sense.
But anyway, so the big twist at the end of the movie was bananas and stupid. Like it's so poorly executed. It could be it could have been done well if there was if those characters maybe were worked into the movie in some other way. But no, it's just real bad. But are there any other scenes in the movie that stood out to you, Mike? Any action scenes, maybe?
The first big kind of fight scene we have with Cage and his friends, his two guys, in the Russian bar where they want to play cards, and the guy won't let him in the door.
Yep.
Which is a very weird conversation. And then he I think I missed a part too where Cage is I prefer knives, they're quiet, or something. And then he never really stabs anybody in that scene, even though he's got a knife. I don't know, it's real weird. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I did enjoy how quickly the action escalated in those scenes, though. They would go from 0 to 60 in a second. And it was that card room scene starts off with Cage and his two buddies talking to the bouncer outside, and they're like, "You got to let us in. We want to play cards." And the bouncer's like, "I don't want to," and they just immediately punch him in the face.
Yeah.
And then go in and just annihilate the entire room. Cage flips the table, and they're killing motherfuckers left and right. And then that's the tone of the movie going forward. That's the 40-minute mark, and everything after that is matching that for the most part.
Yeah.
And on one level, I enjoyed that. I was this is I realize it's bad, and it definitely feels less polished than other Cage movies, especially even the Cage direct-to-video movies that we reviewed so far. But I do enjoy I get a certain pleasure out of Cage annihilating motherfuckers, and so I do have that going for me in this movie at least.
And it's funny to watch this post John Wick, where it's this is just so bad.
This came out the same year as John Wick.
Wait, hold on. Wait a second. Take me back, Mike.
2014. John Wick, I believe, came out in September of 2014, so 3 months after this movie.
Oh my god.
Yeah. It's crazy, right, man?
Yeah. John Wick's a great movie. That's the moral of this story.
Yeah.
Watch John Wick instead. Although I guess even talking about Taken, like you said, 15 cuts in 1 second while climbing a fence or whatever.
Right, that was Taken 3.
Taken, yeah. But exactly, it does the same thing. This is copying all the devices and structure and stuff from Taken, and Taken 2 and 3 maybe. At least Taken 3, not so hot in terms of the action anymore.
Yeah. I mean, Taken 1 is a good movie, and I like Taken, but it's not I don't think Taken is a great... Taken's a really fun movie because it has Liam Neeson, and that was a really novelty at the time. But the action in Taken, I think, is good. It's competently staged and everything, and Liam Neeson throws himself into it, which is really what makes it good. But it's not like John Wick, for example. I feel like John Wick really. I'm so glad that movies are being influenced by John Wick now because the action is so much cleaner in John Wick. You can actually see what's going on. It's nice.
It's a nice change.
It is a nice change of pace. But after Taken, a lot of movies kind of modeled themselves after Taken, and I think cinema was a little bit poorer for it. in that regard. Like some of them just took the plot, right, where it's like the middle-aged dude, older actor, his daughter is kidnapped, they gotta go save her. And some movies literally just took like the way that movie shoots action. And I think in both cases, it's like, yeah, I mean, you know, Taken was good, but like that's really like a like a lightning in a bottle type situation, I think.
Right. Yeah.
The elements of that weren't good enough to work for other movies. Unlike John Wick, where the elements of that movie have been good enough to get some solid John Wick knockoffs already, like Upgrade, for example, or Atomic Blonde.
Right.
But I did enjoy some of how the action sort of escalated in this movie. I do want to point out the car chase in this movie, which is the point where I was like, I can't understand what's happening anymore. From an action filmmaking perspective, like there's no sense of place, there's no sense of structure with anything that's going on in that sequence. But basically what happens is the Russian Mafia kidnaps Kane, and Cage gets into a car chase with them to try to get him back. And that's the sequence where I'm like, I started noticing that there's like 15 cuts in like 3 seconds, and like I can't. It doesn't stop the focus on a single thing. And I remember when we reviewed The Rock way back in the day. There's the big car chase in The Rock, and that's a car chase that is somewhat incomprehensible from an action filmmaking standpoint, but you can also still tell what's going on during the sequence. Like it's a really exciting sequence. I love that car chase in The Rock, even though like some editing choices don't really work, because like it's just so dynamically filmed and shot, and like there's so much energy behind it. And this one, it just feels like, all right, and now we're throwing like just 15 random shots of cars. And some of them might have Nicolas Cage in them, like we don't know. You know, it's just all at once. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, I definitely did think of that car chase in The Rock, too, because there is a moment in this one, I think it's at the very end, where, like, there's immediate car explosion, car accident. Like, a cop car gets T-boned, and immediately, boom, huge ball of fire. I was like, this is like the thing in The Rock. That happened.
Like The Rock,
yeah. And I don't think I even put together that that's what was going on in that car chase. Like, that he was chasing Kane.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, because he's also on the phone he's trying to get Danny on the phone at the same time, and Danny's not answering the phone, and I love the scene after that where Cage finds Danny. Danny has been too busy banging strippers and doing coke to answer.
Just being a cool guy.
Being a cool dude, selling meth to bouncers outside of Sweet 16. To answer, he couldn't answer his phone because he was too busy doing those things, and so Cage interrogates Danny, ultimately ends up killing him. Just beats the shit out of him, and like that's the Cage moment for me in the movie, where he's just shouting, "You talked,
yeah,
you rat, you rat." He just keeps shouting, "You're a rat, you're a rat," like over and over and over again.
What's the big deal? They took Caitlin and they shot her in the head. Maybe that's not a big deal to you, but it's a pretty fucking big deal to me. And the only reason they would do something like that is if someone talked. No one asked you where you got the money for those guns? O'Connell didn't want to know how you managed to pull off something like that on your own? Paulie, yeah? I've always been loyal. You've always been an idiot. Screw you, Paulie. Nothing's ever your fault. There's always someone else to blame, always someone there to bail you out. Who's bailing you out now? Whose man are you now? Are you my man? Are you sure about that? Are you O'Connell's man? Paulie, easy. Knock it off! You talk! I give you the guts to your boss, so he take care of you, make those guns go away. That's not what happened. Talk. It's not what God is dead. We swore not to talk about it, not to spend the money, not to draw attention to ourselves. I'm not a rat. You are a rat. Rat.
So if there is like one standout Cage freak out moment in this movie, that would be the one for sure.
There was another one for me when he chases down Uncle Ben's murderer. After that guy's been shot, and he just has like this very long foot chase after being shot,
right?
And Cage is like beating him up, and he's like trying to get the info, you know, trying to get the straight dope, and he's like starting to fade out because he got shot, and he's like, don't die, and then he just screams for like a while.
Well, he keeps shouting, don't die, and then he smashes the dude's head against the floor a bunch of times.
19 years ago, I threw you from a car and stole your boss's money. Remember that? In the mask. Jim thought I took the money. He tortured me for 2 days.
I lost these fingers because of you. Ish.
Someone put a bullet in my daughter's head with a Russian handgun. Who did it? Huh? What was it, turn on? Huh? Someone after had a turn? Who was it? Who did it? Who did it? No, don't die. Don't die. No, don't die.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is not helpful to what you want to happen, Nicolas Cage.
The futility of rage, Mike.
It's the rage. It's that Cage rage. And, despite starring in Rage, he is still just Nicolas Cage. But that sequence, it's like, it's a foot chase through this Russian strip club that goes onto the roof of the strip club. And then when they get on the roof, I was wondering to myself, wait, why is that roof so wet? Why is there so much water?
Full of water. Yeah.
On this roof? It's like a full coating of water on this roof. It's not raining. Like, it's just a wet roof, and I couldn't understand why. But then, the guy gets shot, and he's like, Cage is trying to get info out of him, and then the guy's like fading away, and Cage is like, no, don't die, smashes him a bunch of times, and then when it's clear the guy is dead, Cage shoots him like 15 times.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
All while shouting like, who did it? Who did it? Who did it?
Oh, it's crazy.
It's kind of incredible, actually. So Rage is not a good movie, dude. It's not. No. But there are a couple of standout Cage freakout sequences that I think we have spotlighted, and I am glad we did. What did you think of Peter Stormare in the movie?
What is happening with his character? Who is he?
Well,
is he Cage's former mob boss guy?
I believe he's Cage's former boss, and he's trying to warn Cage not to get back into the crime game or whatever, because he said he let him go, and not everybody gets to walk away. But again, all this stuff with the Russian mafia feels completely moot, and it's not something that you can easily follow, because the movie doesn't ultimately care about it, because it doesn't relate to anything that happens at the end of the movie. So Peter Stormare is in the movie for really 2 or 3 scenes. He's in a wheelchair. There's the first scene where he meets up with Cage is at his daughter's funeral, and he shows up and he says to him, "Oh, I see you've got a beautiful house and you've got a beautiful wife." And I was like, "Is he quoting the Talking Heads?"
This is not my beautiful car.
My God. How did I get here? So that was just a weird thing for me, because I think about that song way more than I probably should, and so
all the time.
And so when he said that, I was like, "That's so weird." But yeah, so the movie kind of has like a showdown with Peter Stormare and the other Russian guy who ultimately kills Kane, and the other Russian guy kills him, and then at the end of the movie, that guy kind of invades Cage's home, and this is after Cage had discovered that his daughter was killed by her friend by accident. He's home, and he gives his wife a call saying like, "Oh, it's over, I love you," and all that. And then the guy comes in and kills Cage.
Right.
And which actually is how the movie begins too. It has an in media re beginning, where it's like it starts with the ending. But it's not like it's like a flash of what's it's like you see like Cage's eye, and you see like a door handle open, and that's it. And then you see the actual end of the movie where you see those same shots, and then it cuts to credits, and then the credits roll over a scene of like the police investigating the house and like dragging Cage's body out, and it's like, I don't know why that needed to be there. Like, we can pretty much guess what happened once you cut to credits. Like, once you cut to black like that, it's like, yeah, Cage is dead. That's the end of the movie. We didn't need to see the scene after that,
I could just imagine them being done like in the editing bay, and just like looking to the director and being like, "But how are they going to know what happened?" Okay, we'll go back and reshoot.
Yeah,
this one thing. Yeah, super weird. And like I felt upset that I had to give this movie 45 more seconds of my time just to make sure,
just to see if anything was happening. Right? Yeah. Just in case Cage popped out of the bag, being like, "I'm alive, and I've still got Ray."
Yeah, just murdering everybody.
Which is what this movie is. It's Cage just murdering everybody. And on one level, there's some enjoyment to be had from that. On another level, this movie is very bad. I think it's, I'm not sure if it's the worst movie. It's not the worst movie we've reviewed, I don't think. But Of the direct-to-DVD action movies that we've done so far, which I believe consists of Trespass, Stolen, Seeking Justice, I don't think there's been another one. Maybe there has.
No, I don't think so.
The direct-to-DVD ones, anyway. There's been plenty of action movies, but those are like the ones that are like, you know, the non-theatrically released, like the ones that are mostly focused on direct-DVD. I'm pretty sure it's just those three, and now this one. This is the worst of the four, I would say. And there's plenty more of these kind of movies to come, so maybe that ranking will change at some point. But I really hope it doesn't. I really hope Rage is the bottom, and we'll see what happens, I guess.
We can only hope.
Yeah, we can only hope. But does that about wrap things up for you, Mike? Are you done talking about Rage?
Yes. Yeah. I don't think there's really a whole lot more to say. If you've seen Taken or any relatively action thriller movie in the last 10 years, you got it.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, fair enough. Rage, not a good movie. A couple of choice Cage moments, but that's about it. Watch them on YouTube or whatever. Right now, let's check out the Letterboxd reviews for Rage, and one Netflix review I think I have here also. This is a 4.5-star review from Letterboxd, which reads, in which a self-loathing, self-destructive alcoholic endeavors... Oh, wait, nope, this is the...
I was like, wait a second.
That's a review from Joe. Never mind, forgot to delete that one. Here's a 1-star review from Rage from Letterboxd that goes, Rage, or Memories of Accidental Murder, or Nicolas Cage Goes Out Like a Bitch, the movie.
Whoa.
Those are both spoilers, I guess, but also... Who cares? I should have watched a different Nick Cage movie. This one isn't recommended. I just got so fucking lucky with the last few I've watched. I got cocky and thought that I could enjoy just about any movie with the Cage. This movie pretty much disproves that sentiment. I mean, I still watched it, but it is the most utterly dull thing ever. There isn't a single scene where Cage was allowed room to breathe and act like himself. That, more than anything, is why I just can't even slightly respect this film. It didn't respect Nick Cage enough to let him do his thing, and it has no redeeming qualities because of it. I hope you're happy, a director who could literally not compose a single goddamn scene and who broke the 180 rule about 17 goddamn times in one goddamn scene. Get the fuck out of here. There's a lot of rage in these reviews, Mike. I will say that. Right now he's a 1-star review of Rage. For the second time, Cage's daughter has been kidnapped, and spoiler alert, doesn't turn out so well in this one. Who is he this time? A former mobster turned Alabama construction tycoon, Paul McGuire. I never would have thought it could be possible that you could have Nick Cage and Peter fucking Stormare in the same film, and it would be a joyless abyss. Yet here lies Rage. Not only is it devoid of entertainment, it's also shockingly cheap. From the amateurish camera work to the bland sets to the dinner theater level supporting performances, this has the look and feel of a direct-to-video Steven Seagal flop. It's like the producers secured the services of Cage, Stormare, and Danny Glover, and then looked down and realized they only had $12.73 to shoot the movie with. Caginess, 6 out of 10. He goes off the rails on a rooftop scene. That's literally the only saving grace of the film.
Wow.
Here's a 2-star review of Rage, also from Letterboxd. If you are to remember just one lesson from this film, it's if you are dating Cage's daughter, he will expect you to get shot protecting her.
I can't believe that's a real-ass quote from this movie.
That's a real thing that he says. Like, he's having a very serious conversation with this, 16-year-old kid who is not dating Cage's daughter. He is possibly interested in asking her out. And he says, well, if you were dating my daughter, I'd expect you to get shot protecting her. It's like, all right. Jesus. Here's another review. This one has no rating. It's from Netflix. In this hair-raising adventure, Oh, by the way, should point out, there's a lot of puns about Nicolas Cage's hair in this review. And they're all, most of them are puns that you really need to see written in order to work. So I'm going to try to emphasize them as best I can as I read them.
Okay. Thanks for the tip, Mike.
In this hair-raising adventure, Nicolas Cage is out to pay back the bad guys that made his daughter die, D-Y-E. I'm not one to usually plug a Nick Cage film, but this hero was one to root for. There were some loose ends that could have been tied up had they gone through the script with a fine-tooth comb. The main highlights, main spelled M-A-N-E,
Nice.
were the brushes with danger. But I would have trimmed a bit of the razor-sharp dialogue and choppy bits to make this film really gel.
God damn it. That's amazing.
That's a pretty fantastic review right there. Whoever wrote that on Netflix, if you're listening to this, which I assume you are.
Yeah.
Finally, I got one more review here, Mike. It's a 2-star review from Letterboxd. And it's from a guy. I think we know him, actually. His name is Mike Smith. And it goes, despite starring in Rage, he is still just Nicolas Cage.
You can't do your own.
Well, I just did, Mike. Actually, I was not disconcerted, but I was upset because I had been thinking of this joke for like 2 years at this point, which is why I was saying it over and over again in this podcast.
Right.
And when I posted that review to Letterboxd, I looked at the other reviews that were on Letterboxd. A lot of people had very similar variations on that joke.
Oof.
But you know what? I'm proud of it. This was my joke. There are many jokes like it, but this one is mine. And in any case, that is Rage. I think we've pretty much talked about this movie to death. Mike, where can we find you online this week?
You can find me at MDFilmBlog on Twitter.
And you can find me at MSmithFilmBlog on Twitter. Thanks so much for listening to The Complete Works. I'm Mike Smith. That's Mike DeCriscio. If you're listening on iTunes, or even if you're not, make sure to rate and review us. 5 stars would be great. Tell people you know about the show if you can. If you want to contact us, you can do so by emailing NicolasCageCompleteWorks@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. Now join us for the next Complete Works, where Nick Cage enters the faith-based film market with a remake of Left Behind. And I am dreading this one.
Yeah.
As far as like personal biases go, I think most faith-based films are like the worst thing of all time.
Is that one guy from Saved by the Bell or whatever the fuck in this? No, who is that guy?
I think you're thinking of Chad Michael Murray. No, I mean he's.
No.
I think Chad Michael Murray's in this. You thinking of Kirk Cameron?
Yes, that's the one.
I believe Kirk Cameron might have been in the original.
Okay.
But this is the remake. There were like 3 or 4 Left Behind movies before the one we're going to talk about today. We will not be doing a retrospective on the entire series. We will only be doing
thank God.
the one with Nicolas Cage in them. Because that's, I think, all we can handle. But yeah, that's going to be happening in 2 weeks. Plus, keep an eye out for FilmBookcast, where we'll be talking M. Night Shyamalan's big conclusion to the Unbreakable/Split trilogy. And that movie is called Glass. I have seen it now, and it's gotten a very divisive reaction among fans and critics. I will say that I am pro-Glass. That is the flag that I am planting, and I am sticking with it. I'm very curious to see what your reaction to the movie will be, Mike, when you watch it. But first, you got to watch Unbreakable, I think, is the is the
that's the key to everything, is watching the first movie.
Exactly. You watch, because I was actually listening to our review of Split that we did back 2 years ago at this point. And it was really funny listening back because you had not seen Unbreakable at the time, and the twist fell completely flat for you because you had not seen the movie. So I would definitely recommend watching Unbreakable before you watch Glass because it will help you out, definitely.
Okay, that's fair.
So you'll do that sometime this week, and then, next week we'll be back with Glass. Thanks so much for listening, guys, and remember, despite starring in Rage,
God damn it,
he is still just Nicolas Cage.